Now it's time for the last word with Katie Fang, who's in for Lawrence. Good evening, Katie.
Hey, Alex, listen, we just got some kind of crazy news. So you know how everybody's been saying that 500 people have gotten notices to appear on Monday for Donald Trump's first criminal trial? Well, NBC News now getting some source reporting that 6,000 jurors will be subpoenaed next week from Manhattan Criminal Court, more than 1,500 for Monday. Now, listen, this is just not for Trump's trial, but because a lot of people don't report for jury duty, they're still saying that they think 500 will appear on any given day. So think about that.
Well,
6,000.
casting a wide net in this city of ours, Katie, or mine, I should say, but you're a welcome addition. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting process, which we will be covering in detail next week.
Well, thanks, Alex. I appreciate everything.
Have a great show.
Thanks. And Donald Trump's last-ditch effort to avoid accountability denied. Trump will appear in court on Monday, as we just talked about with Alex, as jury selection gets underway in the first criminal trial against a former president in the history of the United States. In the first of his 4 criminal cases in 4 different jurisdictions, Donald Trump is charged with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to hide hush money payments that he made to cover up affairs that he had ahead of the 2016 election. Today, Judge Juan Merchan denying Trump his wish of delaying the start of his criminal trial. Trump sought an indefinite adjournment due to, quote, prejudicial pretrial publicity. Merchan not buying it, ruling, quote, the remedy that defendant seeks is an indefinite adjournment. This is not tenable. He was personally responsible for generating much, if not most, of the surrounding publicity with his public statements, which were often made just a few steps outside the courtroom where the proceedings were being conducted, and with his unrelenting media posts attacking those he perceived to be responsible for his plight. Donald Trump, again, attacking the judge and the trial today while claiming that he planned to testify, which means he would face the choice of truthfully answering questions about his encounter with adult film star Stormy Daniels or perjuring himself.
Yeah, I would testify, absolutely. I'm testifying. I tell the truth.
Trump at his Florida club today claiming that he had an election integrity announcement. Election integrity. Let's be clear. 3 of the 4 criminal indictments against Donald Trump are tied to election interference. Judge Merchan summed up the allegations against Donald Trump this way in the jury questionnaire. Quote, the allegations are in substance that Donald Trump falsified business records to conceal an agreement with others to unlawfully influence the 2016 presidential election. And both the federal criminal case in Washington, D.C. and the state criminal case in Fulton County, Georgia, center around Donald Trump's efforts to steal the 2020 election leading up to and on January 6th. But Donald Trump has always attempted to interfere in an election that he might end up losing. He did it in 2016. He did it in 2019 in the phone call that he was impeached for when he tried to extort dirt on Joe Biden ahead of the 2020 presidential campaign. He did it in 2020, and he's doing it again in 2024. And so to try and change the subject from Monday's trial, Donald Trump called the cameras to the place where he's accused of illegally retaining and hiding classified government documents, alongside Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson, who himself helped Donald Trump try to overturn the 2020 election. Trump attempting to inject more distrust into the electoral system by promoting more baseless claims about voter fraud.
We will do everything within our power to ensure that we do have free and fair elections in this country. If we don't have that in a constitutional republic, we have nothing. It's the basis of who we are as a nation, and we owe that to the American people. And so what we're going to do is introduce legislation to require that every single person who registers to vote in a federal election must prove that they're an American citizen first.
This is not groundbreaking, right? First, the 2020 election was the most secure in our nation's history, according to top election security experts. Second, non-citizen voting is already illegal and extremely rare. Third, Donald Trump does not value a free and fair election. We've heard him claim for nearly 4 years that the 2020 election was rigged or stolen from him. And now he's trying to lay the groundwork to undermine the 2024 election, just as he did the 2020 election. Former chair of the January 6th committee, Benny Thompson, said in a statement today, quote, Donald Trump lost to President Biden by over 7 million votes, fair and square. But Donald Trump still can't admit it. The sham event at Trump's country club should remind the American people of a dangerous truth. Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy and a danger to our Constitution. Donald Trump and Mike Johnson don't care about election integrity. They care only about helping Trump's campaign of revenge and retribution to regain power at all costs. Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. She's a former House impeachment manager in the second impeachment of Donald Trump. Congresswoman, it's deja vu, right? I mean, the conversations that you and I and others have had for years center around the one common denominator that always rings true for Donald Trump. False claims that there's something compromised about the elections and the electoral system that we have. We're on the eve of his first criminal trial for a case that I think a lot of people have always underestimated. It's been labeled a hush money trial, but a lot of us know, including you, that this is really an election interference case. It's this idea that he tried to hide these payments that he made so that he could influence the outcome of that election. Your thoughts about what we're going to encounter on Monday?
Katie, I'm glad to be with you. Thanks for inviting me. And look at that framing with Speaker Johnson down in Mar-a-Lago. Would you or I or anyone of any decency head to Mar-a-Lago this Friday? Do you know what we just went through in Congress these last several weeks with the feckless Speaker of the House, with a majority that can't box their way out of a paper bag? They can't get support for Ukraine, for the border, for FISA. They couldn't figure their way out of anything. I am stunned at the Speaker's fecklessness. I am stunned that he would stand next to the former failed president on the eve of this trial. You're absolutely right. It is wrong to call this a trial about the hush money of a porn star. What it is was election interference. Let's be plain and simple about it. It's interesting, it's enticing, it's intriguing, it's sexy to say it's something about a porn star. No, it's election interference. It was on the eve of the election when the president knew, or the nominee knew, that he was likely to be suffering greatly if it was shown that he had had this affair. So he figured out how to pay off the woman with whom he had the affair, as well as the other woman with whom he had an affair. That'll come through in this trial as well. This was direct election interference. And for Speaker Johnson to be so complicit is so against his persona. Remember, he's a man of Christian faith. He's a smart lawyer. And yet, look what he's done. He's become a puppet for the former president.
And, you know, Congresswoman, one of the critical roles that you've played in Congress, among many, was serving as an impeachment manager. And the crux of that second impeachment trial for Donald Trump in the Senate was centered again around election interference. And yet you have this, what you said, this juxtaposition of Speaker Mike Johnson with Donald Trump today talking about, of all things, laughably, election integrity. We know that Trump has used election integrity as a banner to wave to excuse criminal behavior on his part. How does it feel to now see him do it again and again, despite your best efforts and others to make sure that there was accountability for him back in the impeachment trials?
Well, Katie, you're absolutely right. I'm a member of Judiciary, so I was a part of impeachment 1, when you remember the famous phone call with President Zelensky, a new president, where he said, I'll need you to do a favor, though. You want those javelins? You want a meeting in the Oval Office? I'll need you to do me a favor, dig up some dirt on my opponent, Mr. Biden. And then impeachment 2. Think about it. And I literally had conversations with Mike Johnson, who was a member of Judiciary. You know, when we voted for Speaker and it was the round with Mike Johnson, I knew exactly who Mike Johnson was and what he stands for. He stands for the tearing down of faith in our institutions. And yet, as I sat on the floor, Katie, Democrats next to me said, "Do you even know who this guy is?" I said, "Yes, I know exactly who this guy is. I have seen him perform alongside Mr. Jordan in a different style, but the exact same mode in judiciary." You know what was sad? After the January 6th, you know I was there. I was there up in the gallery, hauled out in a gas mask along with all of my colleagues and Mr. Johnson as well. And you know, after that, of course, we came back to the floor in the middle of the night, determined not to have the insurrectionists have the last word, that we would do our constitutional duty. What did Mr. Johnson do in his vote? He voted not to certify, for example, Pennsylvania's electors. And in a conversation with me a couple of days later on the floor, right next to the George Washington, beautiful painting, he tried to defend his amicus brief about the false election and his vote not to certify the election, not to certify the Pennsylvania electors, not to mention the others. The Speaker is in a very precarious place. He literally cannot say who is the free and fair winner of the election. Did you notice that when he was asked upon his ascension to the speakership? He's in a very precarious place, and he's not acting as Speaker. Obviously, the former president is acting as Speaker, and I guess Mr. Johnson is just down there as his whip.
Well, depending on what happens in this trial, I guess we'll see whether or not Donald Trump ends up being convicted felon, yet House Speaker de facto Donald Trump. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, thank you for getting us started. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Good to be with you.
And today, Donald Trump's two co-defendants in the classified documents case were in a Florida courtroom trying to get those charges dismissed against them for helping Donald Trump obstruct the federal government from retrieving those classified documents. Trump appointed federal judge Aileen Cannon seemed skeptical of the motions to dismiss the charges against co-defendants Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, suggesting that those arguments should be made to the jury during the trial. And this comes as we're learning more from the newly revealed transcript of Walt Nauta's 2022 interview with FBI special agents, a few months before the FBI executed a search warrant at Trump's Florida club and recovered dozens of boxes of evidence. Joining us now from Miami is Perry Stein, Justice Department reporter at The Washington Post, and Bradley Moss, a national security attorney who represents people who work in the intelligence community. Thanks to the both of you for being here. Perry, get us started and kind of give us a really quick breakdown of what happened in the courtroom today.
Right. So we saw Trump's two co-defendants make their motions to dismiss the case. I mean, I think the best way to describe it is that they said, we're charged with all these allegations around obstruction. You say we lied to, misled investigators and tried to block investigators from getting back these documents. But what their attorney said is, but we didn't know that there was an investigation, and that the indictment doesn't lay out evidence that we knew that there was an investigation, or we knew that there was classified documents in the boxes. So how can we be charged with a conspiracy when we didn't know what we were conspiring to? And they want the charges dismissed because of that.
Okay, so Bradley, this is a motion to dismiss. Putting aside the fact that we're supposed to go to trial May 20th, which is, I don't know, in 4 weeks. You got Judge Cannon. I know it's not going to happen, whatever. But, you got Judge Cannon doing motions to dismiss now, less than a month before a trial, and she's not ruling from the bench. I mean, these are layup motions to be decided, and yet we still don't have a ruling on them, despite 2.5 hours of Judge Cannon asking questions to both sides.
Yeah, so when the notice came out on the court docket that obviously the motion hearing had been held, and one of the things I noticed was in this paperless order, orders to follow. And I wanted to say, okay, this year? Because it really shouldn't be that difficult, as you were noting. And as even the reporting, like Perry was noting, These are not issues of law for Judge Cannon to be deciding. These are issues of fact. It's the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil defense. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't see anything. I didn't say anything wrong. Great. That may be true. Those are factual issues for you to argue at trial after the government's put on their case and you've tried to win with a directed verdict. That's not a matter of law for Judge Cannon to resolve, and she should be easily able to dispose of this. And this is the problem, is that because she takes so long with these things, it's not that I really think she's going to throw out the indictments. It's she's just going to drag her feet on getting to it.
So, Perry, any indication from Judge Cannon, though, to the point of this conversation that we're having, that she's going to be ruling imminently?
She did not give any indication this time. We know in Trump's motion, one of Trump's motions to dismiss when she had a hearing, she ruled fairly quickly. I mean, we just don't know. As you said, motions to dismiss are long shots. These were arguments that she seemed really skeptical of, but she also really grappled with the issues, was asking a lot of questions for 2 hours. And I think it's important to note she didn't have to hold a hearing, right? She could have accepted, ruled from their written arguments, but she decided to hold a hearing. So, again, I don't think that means she's dismissing the indictment. She definitely came to this hearing. She was prepared. She had lots of questions for both sides. She seemed really skeptical, as you said, that she kept saying these are questions for a jury, not for now. But she did, really seem to grapple with it.
Bradley, when do we get to the point when Nauta de Oliveira, I'm not really going to count Nauta in this. I'm just going to ask about de Oliveira starts pointing the finger and saying, well, Trump told me to do it?
If this actually gets pointed towards a true trial date. If these motions get thrown out, if the statements from people like Evan Corcoran don't get suppressed, if it looks like we're legitimately going to trial, Carlos de Oliveira is the weak link. He has the least amount of stake in this, and he has no reason to throw himself under the bus like Walt Nauta is. He's the one I expect to cut a deal. Does that sink Trump? No, but it'll certainly hurt, and it will look bad from an optics standpoint, particularly in the media, particularly with the public, that one of his co-defendants is cutting a deal. That's what we're all waiting to see once Judge Cannon finally issues rulings.
I don't mean to rain on our parade, but she also has about 5 substantive motions she hasn't ruled on that Donald Trump has filed that are motions to dismiss. Perry Stein and Bradley Moss, thank you so much for bringing us the latest from Fort Pierce. I appreciate it.
Have a good night.
And coming up, Vice President Kamala Harris went to Arizona today where she championed reproductive rights after the Arizona Supreme Court upheld an 1864 law banning all abortions. Arizona State Senator Eva Birch shared that she had an abortion after her pregnancy was no longer viable. She joins us next. This afternoon, Vice President Kamala Harris, the highest elected female official in our country, lambasted Donald Trump in a fiery speech in Arizona, blasting the state Supreme Court's decision to uphold a civil rights era near total abortion ban.
We all must understand who is to blame. Former President Donald Trump did this. During his campaign in 2016, Donald Trump said women should be punished for seeking an abortion. Don't forget that. He said women should be punished. As President Donald Trump handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court because he intended for them to overturn Roe, and as he intended, they did.
If you look at what we've done with Roe v. Wade, we did something that everyone said couldn't be done, and we got it done. And I give great credit to the Supreme Court and the justices for having the courage to do it.
Courage? More like cruelty. But that is the point. Stripping women of their rights to life-saving health care using a draconian law. Think about it. 160 years ago, when this law was originally enacted, Arizona was a territory. Women had no power. And Vice President Harris, she would have been a slave. According to the Guttmacher Institute, an estimated 18 million women do not have abortion access in their state. But here's the thing. This isn't 1864. It's 2024. Women wield power. They hold office. And when they speak out, they are heard. Like Arizona State Senator Eva Birch, who shared her personal abortion story this week with a stirring reminder that the real power is in the ballot.
A couple weeks ago, I had an abortion, a safe, legal abortion here in Arizona for a pregnancy that I very much wanted. A pregnancy that failed, like many of my pregnancies before it, an embryo that was dying, and a miscarriage that was destined to happen. Somebody took care of me. Somebody gave me a procedure so that I wouldn't have to experience another miscarriage, the pain, the mess, the discomfort. And now we're talking about whether or not we should put that doctor in jail. This is outrageous that we would even dignify the consideration of this type of ban. A ban drafted when women had no say, when Arizona was not a state. This isn't what the people of Arizona or the people of this country want. We're talking about a small number of really extreme political leaders calling the shots for everybody else. Republicans don't want this. Independents don't want this. Democrats don't want this. We have to look at who our elected leaders are. The time is now. It's done. I've had enough. The people of Arizona have had enough. We are electing pro-choice candidates in November. Watch it happen.
Joining us now is Arizona Democratic State Senator Eva Birch. Senator, there really is nothing that I can say to follow up after you delivered that incredibly heartfelt, such raw emotion, because it is something that is so intimate and personal to you. But I'm going to offer a small correction to what you said. Republicans did want this. They wanted this. The Republicans wanted this, but now it is squarely the dog with its teeth firmly on the bumper of that car. They have caught the car. So now they want to backpedal like Kari Lake and pretend like this is so outrageous and this is not what they intended it to be. How do we hold them accountable for them wanting Trump being the architect of the fall of Roe and the Republicans being responsible for you having to stand in front of the world and say and explain what happened to you?
Thank you so much for having me here today. And I think that what's important to keep in mind is that we are going to have Republicans voting for this ballot measure when it comes to the ballot in November, and that plenty of Republicans receive abortion care. And I think that that's the point that I'm trying to drive home, is that this is really self-defeating, and that it is the Republican leaders and these elected officials who are behaving exactly like we knew they would, who are behaving the way that they have for decades, slowly eroding these rights over time. And now they're really in a tricky situation, because the Republicans in Arizona don't want to allow a Democratic bill to be the solution to this problem. They don't want to allow us to have a win. They don't want us to get credit for cleaning up their mess. But they also are not going to be able to put forward a bill of their own, because the infighting right now in the Republican Party is pretty intense. So I'm not really sure what it is that they plan to do with this situation, but it is imperative that we hold them accountable. We cannot let them forget that this is a problem that they created, and that even if we do come up with a short-term solution for this problem, even if we do repeal this ban, they are going to continue to chip away at these rights and to erode these rights for decades to come. We really have to make our voices heard in November. Electing pro-choice candidates is our only solution.
Vice President Harris stating today in your state of Arizona that Trump is to blame for this. He is the architect of the fall of Roe, and she attributed it a lot to the fact that we have 3 Supreme Court justices who were appointed by Donald Trump during his administration. You know, I've always said, Senator, that the fall of Roe didn't happen overnight. I think there was a little bit of some complacency that went into the idea that there's no way that it could ever happen, because there's been decades of precedent. Admittedly, we got snowed during those confirmation processes and during those confirmation hearings. But I mean, how important is it for people to also understand, too, that the judges that are making these decisions, some of whom are elected into the offices, some of whom face merit retention votes, like in my state of Florida, for example, that the judges also need to have some accountability for what's happening, too?
No, that's 100% true. We have Republican appointed judges who are responsible for this decision that happened here in Arizona. And I think that's where the conversation has to shift to these down ballot races. Yes, it's very important to focus on the top of the ticket. This happened because of Donald Trump. There is no question about that. And that is an imperative part of the conversation. But what happens in our local government, in our local legislatures, and with our local judges is equally important and can have just as much, if not more, of an effect. We see it happening state after state after state as these rights are being withdrawn and taken away. And the solution time and time again is for citizens to be able to come and take that power back. But we know that these fights are going to continue and that we really need to obtain majorities and retain the White House in order to make the difference that we need to make after November.
I do want to share my sympathy to you, Senator, for your loss, and the fact again that you have to be so transparent about something that's so personal to you, and yet you're doing it so that I can have an opportunity to have access to reproductive rights. My daughter can have that access. This can be something. I can't begin to express how much I appreciate what you've done to be able to speak out about this. I know it hasn't been easy for you, so my sympathy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. What I will say is that women should not have to re-traumatize themselves over and over and over again to be able to access appropriate health care, to be able to have the rights that they deserve. But I also think that it's so important for those who do feel comfortable speaking out to speak out loud and as broad of an audience as they possibly can. We have to have these conversations because this moment is so critical. And if we don't tell our stories, then the people who are controlling the conversation are wrong. What they're saying about abortion is wrong. What they try to the picture that they try to paint of who the abortion patient is, it's wrong. And we have to take back that narrative. We have to take back that story. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it. I'm sad that my pregnancy didn't progress. We've tried to have a baby and to grow our family. And I don't know how people in Arizona are supposed to feel comfortable trying to grow their families when we're in this really inhospitable environment for pregnant people right now. You know, this is a hostile environment to be pregnant in Arizona, not knowing whether or not you're going to be able to get the care you need if something goes wrong. It's unacceptable, and we just have to do something about it. This is the best that I can do, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Well, it's more than just good. It's amazing. And again, thank you so much, Arizona State Senator Eva Birch, for being here and for sharing your story and for being such a strong advocate, like I said, so we all can have a chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, 1 year after the Covenant School mass shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, Senate Republicans there just passed a bill allowing teachers to carry concealed guns on school grounds. The Tennessee House will vote on this bill Monday, including our next guest, Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson. That's next.
This is irresponsible. The public school teachers don't even want the bill. They're not even asking you for this. We just passed legislation to have SROs in every school. Can we see if that works yet? I'm upset, not out of because I don't like you all individually, because I'm mad because this bill puts my child at risk. And all the mothers out here that just got put out, they're saying their children at risk. Look at that gallery. They're asking you not to do this. Put partisan politics aside. I ask you this all the time, but this bill is dangerous. Don't do it. Teachers don't want it. The school districts don't want it. Nobody doesn't want it. It's not going to work. It's going to cause more school shootings. What happened today is a gallery full of mothers who are concerned, and we put them out because you're trying to put guns in teachers' hands. We ought to be ashamed, Mr. Speaker.
That was the scene in the Tennessee Senate this week. State Senator London Lamar with her 8-month-old baby and a microphone in her hands, begging Republicans not to vote to put more guns in schools. Yes, more guns, not less. This week, Republican lawmakers in Tennessee advanced legislation that would allow some teachers to carry concealed guns. Last April, just days after 3 children and 3 staff members were killed in a mass shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville, Donald Trump gave a speech pushing for armed teachers. And so a year later, Tennessee Republicans have decided that their solution to gun violence in schools is more guns in schools. During this week's legislative hearing, there were vocal protests against the bill before state troopers. State troopers removed those protesting from the Senate gallery. Also in the Senate were parents of survivors of the Covenant School shooting. The Tennessean reports Beth Gebhard watched the Senate proceedings Tuesday with tears in her eyes, alongside several other mothers of students at the school. She said her children, 9-year-old Ava and 12-year-old Hudson, survived the shooting because of well-trained teachers and police officers doing their job. She can't imagine a teacher having to also deal with confronting a shooter, especially one armed with an assault-style rifle. A handgun will do nothing against that. If what had happened on March 27th had gone down the way that it did with a teacher armed with a handgun attempting to put the perpetrator out, my children would likely be dead. The Tennessee House of Representatives is expected to vote on the bill on Monday. Joining us now is Democratic State Representative Justin J. Pearson of Tennessee and Tennessee mom Beth Gebhard. Her children attend the Covenant School in Nashville. I want to thank the both of you for being here. You're both obviously concerned about the future of the children in Tennessee. Beth, I want to start with you. I can't imagine. You have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. They still attend Covenant School. You were at that Senate hearing. You were a part of that gallery. The mothers, the parents, they were removed when they were speaking out about wanting to protect their children?
It was appalling. It was truly the most outrageous experience I've had in my life, really. There was just such a level of confusion and pain and we felt discarded. It was just bizarre and painful.
Representative Pearson, I know that you're familiar with the being silenced when you're trying to speak out in that hall, but what is the justification that is coming from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle to vote on a bill and approve it that is not wanted by anyone? It's been tried before in some other counties in Tennessee, hasn't worked. And I understand there's an opt-out in this legislation, and I understand maybe that the voices in support of this say, well, there's training and there's, a certain component of it. But how is it possible that they're so tone deaf about what's really wanted to protect the children in these schools?
This is a dangerous piece of legislation that puts at risk every child in our schools, including putting our teachers at risk as well. You don't have a single teacher in our district or in this state who are asking the legislature to pass this type of legislation. And they certainly aren't asking for us to do it by kicking out mothers from the galleries and those who are advocating on behalf of their kids in the process. What we are seeing is the cowardice of the Republican Party in our state refusing to address the epidemic of gun violence, which is the #1 killer of our children. And instead of ending the epidemic by doing something about the guns that are being proliferated in our communities and doing something that would stand up to the National Rifle Association, the Tennessee Firearms Association, they're attacking parents and they're actually making our schools less safe. They're bringing guns into gun-free zones. And this is only going to have horrendous ramifications for children who will access these weapons and these guns, for teachers who might accidentally harm or shoot their students. Now, these are the real challenges that are going to come from this terrible legislation.
Beth, I don't know what you think about now when you think about your children being in a classroom where, despite best efforts, accidents happen, as the representative talked about. But more importantly, you've had to live through the trauma of a school shooting for your 2 children. They've had to go through that trauma, and they blessedly survived it. You've spoken about the fact that these teachers were focusing on the kids and making sure that they stay safe. These teachers were not focusing on, let me grab a gun and try to get into a shootout in a hallway at the kids' classroom or in the school.
I spoke with my son's teacher about that day. My son was in the 2nd grade. He was adjacent to the 3rd grade where most of the shooting and damage occurred. And in talking to her about this, she explained that in that circumstance, there was absolutely no way that she was going to leave 14 innocent children alone to go, confront the gunman. The bottom line is that our educators need to be educators. They do not need to also wear the hat of a law enforcement officer. It does not make any sense. And it would have been utterly terrifying for my child. When I think about him and how much he needed her, she told me that in that time, she went to bring the shade down. And the shooter, the back of the shooter, she was in the hall. She was right there. And our teacher knew in that moment, her one job was to keep herself silent and her children silent. And that's what they did. They practiced breathing. They watched her breath go in and out, her chest rise and down. And she just told them to follow her. And they held hands and they waited it out. If she had left that room, there is no doubt in my mind, my children would not have survived.
I have a 9-year-old who's in 3rd grade. I don't even know how you're able to share this. I'm grateful that you are. And then I hear this, and, Representative, I want to harp on this for our viewers to understand. Mothers like Beth Gebhard, who talk about this experience, they're being silenced. These are not politicians, right? These are not lobbyists for anti-gun or anti-Second Amendment kind of propositions. These are parents that only want to keep their kids safe. And yet they're being silenced. They're being removed from a public forum because they just want to share their concerns about really flawed and dangerous policies and legislation that's getting passed in your state.
This is the way that the Tennessee Republican Party works. They silence the voices of dissent in order that they can be corrupt, and use their power and be corrupted, absolutely using it. And they wield it against anybody that they believe is going to stand up against them. This is why Representative Jones and I were expelled. This is why the mothers are consistently being kicked out of the gallery and kicked out of committee rooms, even during our special session to address public safety. They are not interested in the safety of our kids. They're not interested in the safety of our teachers. They do not want to end the gun violence epidemic. They only want to proliferate it with bad policies and legislation that is supported by the Tennessee Firearms Association and supported by the National Rifle Association. They are not interested in making our community safer. And we have a responsibility to continue to show up. And I think Beth and all the mothers, like Mothers Over Murder and other organizations that are standing up in this moment to say that there has to be a better way and that this is not the way for us to move forward. But this is on par with how the Republican Party abuses its power. This is not new to me. It is not surprising to me. The removal of people from the galleries anytime that they sometimes are clapping or that they're speaking up in a building that their tax dollars pay for. The Republican Party, Cameron Sexton, William Lambert, they work hard, McNally, Lieutenant Governor McNally, to silence those voices of dissension. And that leads to really terrible and awful legislation that is going to lead to more kids losing their lives to being passed and being pushed through in our state house.
Representative, so what is the solution?
The solution first for this bill is it does not need to go forward. We need to vote this down, and we need to listen to teachers. We need to listen to parents. We need to listen to those who are saying, let's make our community safer. We need to pass safe storage laws. We need to prevent guns from ever getting to the schoolhouse door by preventing people from being able to access weapons of war and being able to get weapons in our state and firearms in our state without even having a permit or taking any educational classes. There are so many research-driven and data-based things that we could do to make our community safer and end the proliferation of guns and the epidemic of gun violence. But the Republican Party first need to be humble enough to listen and realize they've gotten this wrong, and they've made our state and our communities and our schools a lot less safe.
Beth, my apologies. I did not realize that I had cut you off. Please, the last word.
No, well, I wanted to first thank Representative Pearson. We are all so grateful for people like him that are speaking up for for what we all want to see happen. What I was going to add is that for me, this is new. It's not new for him. It is very new for me. I have unfortunately, I think, put a lot of trust in our elected officials to be reasonable, to be the voice of all of us. And what I have seen is appalling. It is as though a confederacy of dunces is at work here. They are passing laws that we have to live by and die by. And it is appalling. It's outrageous. And so I would add that next week there is, like he said, an opportunity, it may be up for vote through the House. And if folks like me in the state of Tennessee recognize that this law is dangerous and should not be made into law, they can text TN to 64433, 64433. And then it'll walk you right through it. It'll seamlessly connect you to a law. And hopefully, and just say, we want to vote no on House Bill 1202.
Tennessee Democratic Representative Justin Pearson and Beth Gebhardt, thank you both so much for being here and for spending the time with us on this important topic. I appreciate both of you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We've got to keep fighting.
Coming up, the Biden, Harris, and Trump campaigns have very different strategies when it comes to almost everything, including how to reach minority voters. The Biden-Harris campaign is opening offices to reach these voters in crucial swing states. That's while the Trump campaign is closing its doors to offices in these key areas. That's next. The Biden-Harris campaign is already spending millions on TV ads, and NBC News reports a hiring spree that now boasts 300 paid staffers across 9 states and 100 offices in parts of the country that will decide the 2024 election, according to details provided by the campaign. Crucial to Biden's reelection are Asian American voters who have emerged as a coveted voting bloc. And the Trump campaign and the RNC, they're doing the opposite. The Nevada Independent reports Republican outreach centers quietly closed in that state after the 2022 election. And in Georgia, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports, quote, the strip mall spot where the Republican National Committee once held pastor roundtables and Lunar New Year celebrations is home to something different and decidedly more spicy, an adult sex toys and novelties retailer catering to an upscale crowd. The space is part of a wave of RNC outreach centers that have closed in recent years, including at least 2 others in the Atlanta suburbs that Republicans had opened to great fanfare for minority outreach. Tonight's Last Word is next. Join me again tomorrow at noon Eastern on The Katie Phang Show. And on Monday, join me for a special YouTube live stream. You'll be able to drop a question in the chat, and we're going to answer your questions live.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.